So Philip will hold a grudge against Elizabeth for the remainder of his life. He is just itching, yearning, love the word yearning for any attempt to get back at her. And as some of you probably know from your reading, he will in fact find it in the near future. Meanwhile, let's talk about the other player in this scenario. If you have your family tree for the Tudors, you will notice on the right-hand side that there is a woman who is the granddaughter of Henry VIII's younger sister, Margaret. That woman is Mary, Queen of Scots, not to be confused with Mary the First. Mary, Queen of Scots is so called because she is raised in Scotland and had been farmed out to France as a young girl, about 5 years old, to be the future wife of Francis II, oldest child of Catherine de' Medici and Lance in the Face Henry II. She was raised in France as a playmate of her future husband. Super awkward. And they get married as young teenagers, about 14 for her, but he dies the next year of an illness. They don't need her anymore because if she's not married to the king, what's her use? And they ship her back to Scotland. So supposedly she spoke English from that time with a hybrid Scottish-French accent. I cannot even imagine what that would have sounded like. You know, the Scottish, I lost it, that kind of thick stuff, and I'm not sure what is this thing, and you do put those two things together, I would pay $74 American to hear someone produce that accent correctly. Like, I would really be interested in that. So if any of you are on the hustle and think you can produce one, I may have just overinflated the figure. I know it's now being recorded, so it's preserved for posterity, but I will conveniently edit this out of the recording later on, and say you're a liar, because, you know, that's what I'll do. But the point is that I would find that fascinating. I just do. So Mary's a really intriguing figure. Mary's also a tragic figure. Again, she's just a plaything for rich, powerful men, even though she herself is a monarch. She will be sent back to Scotland. Her father is the king. Her father will die, and leaving Mary as the actual monarch of Scotland. But even then, she is still a pawn because now she is unmarried. So she must get married. She must have a child. And so this is not her choice. And one of the theories about this, we don't quite know, but there's quite a bit of speculation and some circumstantial evidence that her husband, Lord Darnley, actually sexually assaulted her in the hopes of getting her pregnant and forcing her into a marriage. Because that would have happened even to a monarch at that time. Because an unmarried woman, of course, is by far the worst thing. Well, so for whatever reason, they get married, and they do produce a son. And if you look on your family tree, that son will be the future James VI of Scotland, who will also, through circumstance, become James I of England. He will be king of both realms, but separately. They don't join together until 100 years later in the Act of Settlement 1707. That's the first year we can officially say there is a Great Britain. But that will start when we have James I and James VI. We'll talk about that dude later. He is also the instigator of the King James Bible, the most famous book ever written in the English language. That is at his behest. He is that King James. So anyway, we have this situation where Mary is married to a man she does not love. She has a child, and so supposedly she has a lover on the side. Now, again, this is something kings do often. Kings always have extra women, and that's, high five, bro, that kind of stuff. Of course, Mary being a woman having an extramarital affair, well, we don't like her very much, and we say some nasty things about her, and we have some names that are not very appropriate that we call her, even back in 17th century and late 16th century Scotland. Well, so in a weird twist of fate, her husband, or let me put it this way, one night her home explodes. She's not there. It's not the royal palace, it's like their own private home. Her husband is found because it's an old stone building. It doesn't burn down completely. They find his body. He's dead. But his neck is broken, which is usually not how one dies if one dies in a fire. Who's suspected? That would be Mary, Queen of Scots' lover. Ugh. So they assume she had something to do with it. So she is basically run out of Scotland. Even though she's the monarch, There's like pitchforks and, you know, like torches, all that kind of stuff. And they literally threaten her life and she has to run to get the heck out. She is forced to leave her son behind. Her son will grow up in Scotland under the care of his, you know, extended family and a regency. And someday he will become king himself. Now here's the scenario. By the time this is happening in the 1580s, Elizabeth is now too old to have children. She will not be married, or she might be, but she won't have kids. So we now look at her succession. According to the family tree, because there's a lot of death in the Tudor family at young ages for a variety of reasons, her successor is Mary, Queen of Scots, her second cousin. So to be clear, Elizabeth I is a member of the Church of England. We'll talk about how she treats people religiously in just a minute, but she is a member of the Church of England, and so that once again has become the official religion of the realm. Her successor, her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, who grew up in France, is Catholic. Oh. Since Mary had to abandon her son when he was less than 2 years old in Scotland, her son is raised in the national faith of Scotland, Presbyterianism, an offshoot of Calvinism. The founder of Presbyterianism, John Knox, a Scotsman. You can still visit his house in Edinburgh, which I have done. His house is about a 2-block walk from the grave of Adam Smith, creator of capitalism. Ooh. Okay? Now, and also side note, if you ever go to Scotland, which I highly encourage, beautiful place, they have the greatest condiment known to humankind. The best thing to put on food. Brown sauce. I don't know quite what it is, but it's called brown sauce. And it is delightful. I tend to put it on fish when you get fish and chips and whatnot. It's kind of vinegary. It's kind of like A1, but not quite, but it's wonderful. And the only reason I ever put it on my fish there was I was buying something a couple years ago. They heard my accent. They were like, get this guy ketchup because, or they're like, get this guy ketchup, you know, that kind of thing. Because they assumed I was American, I'd want ketchup. I got pissed. I was like, no, I want what the locals are having. Give me that stuff. And I lathered it on there in spite like I was 12 years old. It was delicious. So, side note, Scottish brown sauce, ooh, best condiment there is in my humble opinion. Now, anyway, back to our regularly scheduled program. The point is that the successor to Elizabeth is Catholic. Her son is raised Presbyterian. So here's what we have. We have a queen who is Protestant, first line of succession who is Catholic, and a second in line of succession is Protestant. Can anybody see what's going to happen here? Any guesses? What kind of problems this could cause?
Someone may be assassinated.
Either Elizabeth or Mary. If you're a hardcore Protestant, you want to kill Mary, Queen of Scots, so we skip her and go straight to her son who's Protestant. If you're Catholic, you want to kill Elizabeth. Mary is still young enough, she could still have more children. And they could be raised Catholic, and we can always rewrite the succession rules, and that child could take over after Mary dies. So this is a time period in the 1570s and 80s of many, many political assassination attempts. Like dozens of them. I'm not kidding. So Elizabeth creates basically her own version of the FBI. The position is literally called her spy master. Imagine having that in a business card. Pretty sweet. And his name is Sir Francis Walsingham. You don't need to know that, but Sir Francis Walsingham is a hardcore, awesome dude. Really interesting and very protective of his queen, and wants to make sure that her life is spared and that any attempt to challenge her authority will be eliminated. Now, very briefly, as a side note before we get to the whole Mary Queen of Scots end here, Elizabeth is known and also characterized the same way that Henry IV of France was, and that is a politique. A politique, which is a term we used the other day. Again, if you need to know how to spell it, it's in your textbook. It's in your study guide. It's also on here. A politique is someone who puts their personal religious opinions secondary to the political needs of their country. Now, do not use tolerance in a modern term. You got fined in Elizabethan England if you missed church 2 Sundays in a row. They took attendance. If only Mr. Rich could do that, I'd be a wealthy man from some of you missing class. So, it's very intriguing. Again, this was a long time ago, but when I was a head RA at Governor's Scholars, which was years ago, 2002, if kids got locked out, they had to come to me and I had to go let them in. Well, this was annoying. You're supposed to be a really smart person. Let yourself in. Keep your key. So what my rule was, the third person to get locked out owed me a pizza. Mr. Ricci, yeah, I made kids buy me pizza. And nobody cared. The early 2000s. It was bad in some ways, but it was a blessed time of wonder. Okay? So, anyway, now I get sued. I get in trouble. I'm like, Back then I was like, me pizza. Stop being late. And you know what? People stop being late. They stop locking themselves out. It was amazing when you force people into bad circumstances. They tend not to do those things. Emma, you said, what if they're sick? Nobody cared. Suck it up, come to church. Sickness is not an excuse. God will make a way for you to attend the services. There you go. Also, their life expectancy was much younger, so they got sick and spread stuff. All right, there you go. Anyway, now, so she's not tolerant by our terms, but she's tolerant for her day. Very much so. And so what's going to happen is whenever Mary Queen of Scots runs out of Scotland, so she's not murdered by her own people, she is going to ask Elizabeth for asylum. Can you give me a place to stay where I will be protected from my enemies? And Elizabeth said, sure. So she is given a castle in the north of England, but she's under house arrest, basically. She cannot leave. Because Elizabeth is also realizing that her cousin is her first in line of succession, and because of their religious differences, there might be plots, assassinations, all that good stuff. So she says, you can stay, but you can't leave this place. And it's guarded, so if she tries to leave, she will be stopped. So it's prison. Nice prison, but prison. All right? So it is believed that Mary has developed a spy network. She gets in a keg of wine weekly. Woo! There is a secret component in this keg where she sends messages out to her supporters and they back to her. She thinks no one knows. The spy master of England, Sir Francis Walsingham, is aware and reads every message that comes in and every message that goes out. And in 1586, a note comes in from one of her supporters that says, basically, I'm paraphrasing here, but basically says, gosh, Your Highness, wouldn't it be great if Elizabeth were to pass and you became the leader of England? No threats, no plots, just like, gosh, I wish you were in charge. Mary writes back a version of, yeah, that'd be cool. Not like, I hope she's dead, or I want to strangle her myself, or here's what you do, here's some money to kill her. Just straight up like, that'd be cool if I could be in charge. Sir Francis Walsingham sees the note, brings it to the Queen's attention. This, Your Highness, is treason. She has wished your untimely death. What is the punishment for treason? Death. Death. So, Walsingham says, this is what you need, Your Highness. This guarantees you a Protestant successor. This guarantees you no more worry or concern or expense taking care of your cousin. This ends it. You can probably lead a relatively normal life the rest of your life because no one's going to try to assassinate you anymore because the religious desire to do so will be taken away. She spends 6 months agonizing. Should I do it? Should I not? She lost a bunch of weight. Some of her hair started to fall out. Like classic stress. Because there is also a European custom of monarchs should not kill other monarchs. In the Middle Ages, when kings are often on horseback in a battle, if you were captured, you would be sold at a ransom back to your own country. They wouldn't keep you as a king, even though that'd probably be advantageous. It was just considered poor form. But finally, after 6 months in 1587, she says, okay. And she signs Mary's death warrant. And Mary will have her head chopped off in 1587. And at her execution, there's a large crowd there. Mary was known for her beautiful, long, red, curly hair. The crowd demands to see her severed head. One of the officials there decides to pick up her head to show it to the crowd, not realizing that beautiful, long, red hair was, in fact, a wig, a really good one. So when you pick up her head falls from the wig and rolls into the crowd. Ooh, not good. And then they start hearing a noise. Her little tiny lap dog had crawled into her like robe and was actually next to her body when she had her head chopped off and is soaked in her mistress's blood. Starts crying, refuses to eat, and literally starves to death about 2 weeks later. Yikes. Now, the only person who really, and Elizabeth like regrets this, she writes about it the rest of her life, like, I don't know if I should have done this, I'm not sure. Her supporters are like, you did the right thing because now we don't have to worry about religion anymore. Woo woo! Except for this. Who hears this and is excited? Philip II of Spain. He's been looking for an excuse to get back at Elizabeth for a decade and a half. How dare she turn me down? Toxic masculinity. And see, he will set forth his navy, which was regarded by many at the time to be the best and the largest in the world. The name for that, Armada, the Spanish Armada. And as I'm sure you all know, as students of history and intellectuals, major changes are usually not the result of one action or one choice. It's usually a confluence of things that happen over time and build up to something. But this is one of those events where the Spanish lost to the English on the English Channel, that little tiny body of water that separates England from France, but is notoriously stormy, as it was that day in 1588. And the giant Spanish galleons are struggling to maneuver, and the small British privateer ships are just zooming around and doing sneak attacks and all that kind of stuff all around the Spanish. Plus, the English know how to sail in this weather. It's their weather most of the time. There's literally a brand of jacket called London Fog. That is not a clever nickname. London is nice. It's a beautiful city, but it's a nice place to visit about 2 months a year. The rest of the year, it's cold and gray and rainy. This is how it is. It's like Seattle. When it's pretty, it's pretty. When it's not, it rains a lot. Okay? So the English are used to it. They handle it. The Spanish are not. Spain's a very warm place. Doesn't go well. The Spanish take the L. And this is one of the great defeats that will, again, cause that decline of Philip II we talked about yesterday. That crazy expenditure where he cannot keep enough money to support all of his desires for conquest. England, it's not a huge victory militarily. It's a huge victory in terms of street cred. The English defeated the Spanish Navy. The rest of Europe, when they hear about this victory, is like, wow, England, who knew? And they start to get that positive vibes going around. It's like the United States in World War I. We don't become the world's greatest superpower after World War I, but we definitely get on the list and people start to notice America is an important country to be an ally with. And that, of course, will happen officially, after World War II, but it starts after World War I. Same thing for England. The Spanish Armada victory is kind of a, ooh, look at us. And we're starting to get popular and people like us and they respect us. And in some cases, they might even fear us. And so the Spanish Armada, in fact, does that. I want to show you a very short video clip. This is from one of my favorite documentaries ever, a 10-part series, 10 episodes. Woo! The History of Britain by my favorite popular historian, Simon Schama. I have had students go to many schools. I've never had a student, to my knowledge, go to Columbia in New York City. So I always say this, if any of you are interested in applying to Columbia and you get in and you decide to go there, I demand that you find Dr. Schama on campus and you get him to sign one of my books for me because he is my favorite popular historian. Love the guy. He's great. All right. Tells good stories, captivating writer, all that good stuff. So this is his series. It's about a 3-minute clip and it shows a dramatic recreation, or actually you hear it, of Elizabeth that day of 1588, the day of the Spanish Armada. She goes out and gives a massive pep talk. This pep talk would be right at home in a Disney movie by a coach before the big game that they're not supposed to win, by the way. But this actually happened. And it is the first speech in recorded history written down by a female ruler, by a queen. And it's a banger, okay? It's awesome. I love it. It inspires me. I want to go out and fight the Spanish 500 years ago, right now. That'd be weird because they wouldn't be there because they're all dead. But I'd want to go. It's really captivating. So we're going to watch this real quick. If you need to run around your house and be inspired, feel free, but it's pretty awesome. And if you don't like it, that's fine. Just don't tell me because then I'll dislike you if you dislike it. So I'm just being honest. Okay. Very short visit here and then we'll come back. Oh, I need to stop recording or it won't let me. show this video. Oh, I did the, sorry. You think I'd learn how to use this by now? No, that's from AP World. Sorry. I'm so sorry. There we go.